With Enzo Maresca set to take over from Mauricio Pochettino, I think now's the time to have the conversation around how could we set up and how could we line up under Enzo Maresca. I'll be basing these lineups on players that already exist right now. I won't be including any players that we could sign this summer, and I'll focus on formations that Maresca has already used at Leicester City. So my friends, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and don't forget, in particular for this video, share your thoughts, opinions, and most importantly, how you see Maresca lining us up for next season. Now let's start with the first formation, and that is his customary and classic 4-3-3. Now here's the 4-3-3 I've gone for. Up front, Mudryk, Nico, Palmer. Midfield of Nkunku, Caicedo, Enzo. Defense, Cucurella, Colwill, Fofana, Reece James, and Robert Sanchez. Now this is how the formation lines up from the start, but in possession, things do change. And as we know, Maresca likes to have a fullback inverting into midfield, so as you're seeing, it could become like this. So you'd see Reece James, Fofana, and Colwill as your back three, with Cucurella and Enzo in that pivot. Up front would be Mudryk, Nkunku, Caicedo playing more box to box, Palmer holding the right flank, and Nico Jackson up front. Now Maresca has tended to turn towards using an inverted fullback in midfield, but he doesn't necessarily always turn to that in every single game that Leicester's played. There have been certain games where he has just used normal fullbacks, but you would imagine that he is set to continue using inverted fullbacks with us for next season. And I've gone for Cucurella over Reece James because I think Cucu has shown and demonstrated already that he is capable playing this role due to that mobility, due to his tactical intelligence as well too. And I think playing alongside an Enzo Fernandez, where ideally he will be the brain of Maresca's team. Everything will go through him. He will have the most passing connections to every player on that field. He'll be the player that we're going to turn towards to help decide how do we pick teams apart. How are we going to target when to time our overloads against the opposition to break through them and create our opportunities. So I know Enzo can play as an 8. People have used it against him last season, but he was injured. He wasn't fully fit. But he's played as an 8 throughout most of his career. It's nothing new to him. And technically, he could replace Caicedo in this system and play further forwards. Who knows? Or maybe that's something Maresca could even turn towards a few times per season. But based on the fact that Harry Winks was also the brain of Leicester City, I feel like Enzo is set to take over that same role in which Maresca is set. And I do think that Enzo must be in that pivot right now, where he's in control of our whole team. Now up front, this is where you're going to hear some issues I've had making this video. Some difficulties I've had making this video, because I'm not necessarily too pleased with the attack. I've gone for Nkunku to be part of the midfield, because let's not forget that Nkunku, whilst at Leipzig and throughout his whole career, has played many games in midfield, many games as an 8. So I can see him continuing playing as that 8/10, because I think that Nkunku can't be holding the width and pinning fullbacks by left. He has to be close to goal. Caicedo alongside him could play the Gallagher role, and I think Caicedo was someone that could become that Michael Essien complete box-to-box midfield player. And under this system, could he be unlocked, and could he replace Conor Gallagher in that same role? Of course, Palmer is outside on the right hand side holding the width, but then is Cole Palmer really a winger like that? And ideally, don't you want Cole Palmer more central so he can connect with Nkunku and our striker? Because at the end of last season, that's when you saw our very best work. And honestly, Mudryk has some talent. He's very inconsistent. And if there was a more talented left winger, maybe I'm turning towards using him over Mudryk right now. So you can see where things are getting harder. I know many people have seen Reece James being in the pivot, copying the same role that Ricardo Pereira has shown whilst at Leicester City. But then I think to myself, is this the best solution and way to use Reece James? Because he is one of the best offensive talents in the world. Down that right flank, the world-class deliveries, world-class attacking play, he's constantly brought goals and constantly brought assists. And I think to myself, if Reece James is playing a disciplined role in the pivot as an inverted fullback alongside an Enzo, we are set to miss out on this world-class creativity And I think if we did decide to sign an Osimhen or a new striker, don't you want Reece James supplying the striker in the books, supplying our whole team in the books, as Maresca likes his teams to play those cutback crosses and of course low-driven crosses inside the box. So I don't feel too comfortable with Reece James being in a pivot. I only want to see Reece James in a pivot when he's coming near the end of his career, in my opinion. But equally, I'll hold my hands up. What if Reece James has to adapt for the sake of team balance under Maresca? What if Reece James can actually perform this pivot role to a level that I'm not even thinking about or imagining at this point in time? These are also possibilities I'm thinking about, because maybe that way, if Reece James is in the pivot, it could allow us to have more defenders at the back. I'm looking at Corwell playing this centre-back / left-back role. I'm looking at Badia, and I'm looking at Fofana as well. Maybe with greater defensive protection in behind, Reece James could have those opportunities to step up forwards and to rotate down that right-hand side alongside your Palmers. Maybe Reece James could excel if he's making those underlapping runs even more. I guess this way you could have Enzo Fernandez alongside him, because I'm expecting Enzo to play that wings role, but equally Caicedo has shown that he can be the one to be that playmaker, to kickstart attacks, and he's very good at that part of the game. So I hope you guys are understanding the difficulties I'm having making this video, because there's like a million different options, ways of playing and lineups we could use under Maresca. And this doesn't even include the new signings we're set to add later this summer to take this team to another level. So it gets me thinking, could Maresca turn towards using a 4-2-3-1, another formation that he has used? In this lineup, I've gone for Nico up front. Again, for the sake of balance, Mudryk is on the left, Nkunku in behind, Palmer on the right hand side. You have Enzo, Caicedo. A defense of Corwell, Fofana, Reece James, with Cucurella and Sanchez in goal. Now the reason why I've gone for Sanchez is simply based on the fact that in terms of ball distribution, he's just slightly better than George Petrovic. Yes, we remember those horror incidences with his poor passes out from the back, putting us under pressure, but I felt like a lot of those moments came, especially when he was recovering from his injury, and he never fully recovered from that. But before that, he did demonstrate that he is capable of stepping up, and under Enzo Maresca, he needs a goalkeeper comfortable playing out from the back, and that's because he's important in creating this makeshift back four to help us play out from the back. I guess in a more classic 4-2-3-1, Caicedo and Enzo get to play in the pivot together. I guess ideally you want both players in that pivot together. With Enzo and Cucurella in a makeshift pivot, is that too much defensive responsibility placed on a Cucurella? Enzo isn't a defensive liability, but wouldn't we feel a lot more assured if he had another capable defensive presence alongside him? Is Cucurella as tenacious as a Caicedo, for example? I'm not too sure. And at the end of last season, we saw the benefits of having both Gallagher and Caicedo in the pivot together, bringing that balance in that midfield. Caicedo and Enzo could be the pivot that makes us feel most comfortable. Maybe using a more classic 4-2-3-1 would allow Reece James to get really forward in the attack. Cucurella could stay back to help create that makeshift back three. And that way, when Reece James advances forward, Cole Palmer can move more central, forming that box of him and Nkunku, Enzo, Caicedo, with Nico Jackson spearheading that attack. At least this way, in a system like this, we do have that defensive solidity that is needed. We must be able to mitigate teams' counter-attacking opportunities if we want to have greater control in games. We won't just keep control exclusively by keeping the ball. We also have to make sure we are minimizing those counter-attacking opportunities in behind, and Leicester did have issues and struggles dealing with those direct attacks in behind, and we even saw that ourselves when we played against them in the FA Cup. So that five of Corwell, Fofana, Cucurella, Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez could be a strong enough platform at least to accommodate using Nkunku and Cole Palmer in those more central positions in between the lines. They'd essentially act as our box-to-box players that Enzo turned towards using guys like Dewsbury Hall and many others at Leicester last season. But I see a lineup like this and maybe I understand things a little more, and maybe I feel slightly more comfortable knowing that, okay, I'm seeing some of my best players playing football in their best positions, and most importantly, in their best roles. And for the final formation, this is the risky one. Of course, it follows principles set by Maresca's ideas already, but what if the ideas just set us up right from the start using a 3-2-4-1? In defense, you'd have Reece James, Fofana, and Levi Colwill. The pivot would have Caicedo and Enzo. The forward players would include Palmer and Nkunku, and then you would have Nico up front. You would have Mudryk, and you would have Madueke on the right side. Now, I know this is like a very imaginative type of lineup, but it is based on the same type of principles already. This team has two wingers pinning back the opposition fullbacks. Now, Maresca was using players like Mavididi and players like Fatawu as those types of wingers who had to control the opposition's fullbacks. Of course, you need to have a striker in the middle that can press, that can run in behind, run the channels, and also score those goals. Goal threat then comes from your two 8-style players in behind. That would be Nkunku and Cole Palmer, who have shown that in these positions on the field, this is where they do their best work. This is where they influence games the most. This is where they score most of their goals and get most of their assists. But then in defense, things get a bit interesting, and when I look at Caicedo, I think of Hamza Choudhury. Now, for Leicester City this season, he did play as an inverted fullback, and he also played as a defender at times. Could Caicedo fulfill the same principle set by a Hamza Choudhury? Because in a team like this, if he had to revert back to 4-5-1 off the ball, is Caicedo then moving to the right back position? We have seen De Zerbi use him in a very similar manner at times. Choudhury has done this, but also Choudhury has also moved into defense at times as well. With a formation like this, I wouldn't expect us to play this way unless we are the undisputed favourites to control the game and take the leads, because I worry about the lack of pressure in those wide areas, and I worry that we are placing too much defensive responsibility on the wingers, have to track back, win their tackles, and follow runs behind. That is the key thing. We saw Pochettino do so much work with Madueke to get Madueke to a good level. Not even an amazing elite level, but a good level. So there are my thoughts and ideas. As I'm saying, I'm not here to make a video expecting myself to predict exactly what Maresca said to do. I'm trying to think about what he does, how he's used players, how roles have changed with certain players he's used at Leicester. I'm thinking in the long term slyly too about, okay, certain players we may sign, like another striker, maybe another star attacking player like an Olise, for example, because if players like this come, that would affect the formation and systems that we do use. Is Maresca going to find some new complicated ways to get us to compete? Or will the solutions be a lot more simpler than we're even thinking of right now? Or am I not giving enough credit to the possibilities of maybe Reece James could excel playing in a more pivot style position, if that helps bring more greater balance to the overall team? As I'm saying, these are still things I'm thinking about, and I'm desperately waiting for pre-season to start to really get some confirmations and ideas behind, okay, what is Maresca going to do with us for next season? So my friends, that is my video for today. Make sure you share your thoughts and opinions as well, because I feel like we're going to see so many different opinions, and I'm really interested and excited to read what you guys have to say. So my friends, on that note, I'm NiniFC, this is BlueLionsTV. See you guys all later.